Hello, welcome everyone to our CFE support webinar series. Today, our webinar, this is our final webinar in the series, is Time Management and Day 3. And I am Debbie Bayless. So a big thank you to CPA Western School of Business, CPA Ontario, and CPA Atlantic School of Business for their great partnership in ensuring that this valuable information is available to you as you prepare to write CFE next month. This webinar is approximately 75 minutes long, and then I will open the floor for questions. If you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A button. So again, please use the Q&A button. And a big thank you to my colleagues. They've done a fabulous job throughout all of these webinars answering your questions. Now, due to time constraint, if we aren't able to answer your question, then please do not hesitate to reach out to your area. So again, let's start with our webinar in regards to time management and day 3. So the goal today is to provide you with effective time management strategies and how to overcome the common challenges that the Board of Examiners have found that candidates face and are the key reasons why candidates have not passed CFE. So as a result, our agenda today, a large part of it focuses around critical reading, creating an outline, and planning. When it comes to critical reading, we're going to talk about the various triggers that indicate this is a required, this is an ask. We're also going to create an outline for a day 3 case. And I'm going to share with you very similar process as what I've shared for the day 1 case and the day 2 case. So fundamentally around the same principles, except for the day 3 case, and this would be only applicable if you find it helpful for the day 3 cases, to also extract the relevant quantitative information and input that in Excel. So it works effectively for day 3 because you have 3 to 4 cases that you have to complete over 4 hours. So time management is critical. So let's give it a try. I'm going to show that to you shortly. I know a lot of candidates have found this very advantageous. An important part of planning is determining the appropriate quantitative tool to use. So I'm going to spend time going over the most common quantitative tools, talk about the types of questions that they answer. So again, if you find that that's an area you struggle in, we're going to cover that this evening. I'm going to talk about writing strategies, how to ensure that your response is clear and concise. And part of that is using discussion frameworks or structures. So I'm going to talk about some of the common structures and when you should use those. That also not only helps in ensuring your response is clear and concise, but it helps manage your time. Throughout this webinar, I'm going to provide you with some very good best practices and solutions around some of those common challenges. So let's start with critical reading, outlining, and planning. I am going to be creating an outline for the TinyCo case, day 3 case. So for those of you who are enrolled in Capstone 2, you would have done this case as part of the module workshop. If you're challenging the exam, I've included here where you can access the TinyCo case. I'm going to focus in this section not only creating that outline, and that's going to be electronically in Word and Excel. I'm going to spend time talking about whether, to be on the lookout for direct or indirect triggers, and I'm going to go over the various quantitative tools. So let's talk about the common challenges. And these are things that the Board of Examiners consistently see when it comes to weak candidates and weak responses. Missing key case facts. Candidates seem to be unsure of what they're being specifically asked to do. Therefore, they end up doing unnecessary analysis. So here I go again. This is the third webinar that I consistently talk about the benefits and how important it is to create an outline, because it's going to solve a lot of those challenges and it's going to increase your chances of completing the required within the time. And we know that's key as far as passing the different levels. And it improves your chances of preparing a competent response. The goal is to ensure that you highlight the key case facts. That's going to address missing those case facts because we're going to extract them. We're going to make sure that they're in our outline, which we're going to turn into a response. If you have everything you need in your outline, in one document, you're not having to kind of look at paper, transpose information from paper onto Word to create your response. You're not having to look at these highlighted information and all of your comments in the margin. It will save you time. Part of this is it's absolutely your roadmap, the roadmap for response. And it also, as you're going through, you're not only identifying the required, but you're breaking it down so that you understand each of the key components you need to answer. So again, I'm going to show you that best practice again about writing the required word for word and breaking it down into smaller pieces. And then, of course, this allows you to sit back and look at all the information you have, look at all of what you're being asked to do, and then be able to rightfully allocate the time to each of those requirements. So I wanted to talk about the advantages. There are advantages and disadvantages when it comes to creating electronic outline. The advantage, as I said, is everything's in that document. And as you're extracting the information, you're able to create the structure that you need for your response. The last comment is it may be faster. Based on all of the information and the successes I've, personally candidates have shared with me, is it has saved them valuable time. Now, there are some disadvantages, so I want to talk about the strategies to combat those. Because again, in Word, you're having to scroll down to see the information. And so you don't have a place where you can see all of your requireds in one quick access. So as I showed you when I did the Path to Competent End Day 2, the outline, partial outline for day 2, as I talked about writing your requires on a piece of paper within your rough booklet. That ensures that you have all of that information there. So you have a good sense of what are you being asked to do. If you do that, that will make a big difference, and because you're going to also have your time allocation, because you don't want to have your time allocation at the top of Word and you're having to scroll up and down. Things I've noticed as an exam supervisor is some candidates have actually done it so that they have a 2-page view. so that they're not having to scroll down as much. And actually, I've seen a few candidates who have much better eyesight than I do, who've actually done a 4-page, view. So there are ways to combat the disadvantages. Again, let me show you the best practice. I will tell you that this is something that has been shared for many years, and it's been shared by candidates who have successfully passed each of the module exams, and they have successfully passed CFE the first time. So again, this is from the candidates. So what we're going to do for the next 25, 30 minutes, we're going to go through and create an outline for Tiny Code. We're going to use the CPA recommended planning 9-step process. So if you notice on the slide, I have part of the case. And then on the other side, I have information of what I would include in the outline. So step one is to allocate the time to planning. CPA Canada recommends that you take 25 to 30% of the length of that case, the recommended length, and you allocate it for reading, creating your outline, and planning. This best practice I'm going to show you takes 25 minutes. So I'm going to put 25 minutes for reading, outlining, and planning. So start time 9 o'clock, going through till 9:25. The remaining time is going to be for writing my response, so turning that outline into my response. I'm going to break that time down a little into smaller pieces once I know what the requireds are. The next step is to read the narrative. So if you notice here, I have the first few paragraphs of that case. What I've done for you is I've highlighted the key information. I've also indicated where that information would fall, kind of what category that information would fall under. I have done that for illustration purposes only. I do not, if you're going to use this best practice, the benefit is as you're reading, you're extracting the information. So the first paragraph gives me the names of the users, gives me the first 2 paragraphs, gives me some information about them. I am not going to highlight it. I am going to type it. I've only highlighted it so you can see where I found the information. I'm not going to write anything in the actual case because I want to be able to write the response based on my outline. So as I said, the first 2 paragraphs talk about the users. It gives me some background information about their experience and about their relationship. They are brothers. And I'm sitting here going, I know that information is important. I'm not quite sure where it's going to fit because I don't know what the requireds are. But the benefit of putting information into Word is you can move it around. So I'm just going to type the information about, for Christopher, he started at Luxury Homes. He can provide business expertise to Tiny, but he's still going to be working at Luxury. And then Sean, they have a good working relationship, but brothers can be stubborn. And he specializes in high quality tiny house construction. So again, I'm extracting it, not quite sure where it applies yet, but I can move it around. Role. So again, I am an external, and that just determines the voice that I use when I write my response. Timeline, okay, so it's February and year end is December 31st. So the next paragraph, and if you notice, I have in a box and I have R1. That is just to indicate, so if you were referencing this and then you were looking at the feedback guide, R1 stands for the first required. Again, none of this is going to be written on that case itself. I'm going to extract the information. So the first thing Christopher asks us is, he says, we need to choose between two business models. So either Tiny Code designs and builds 100% of the house, or the buyer participates in the building. And what they're asking us is, could you help us to quantitatively determine the best model given the demand for each sales price and the selling price we should set for the chosen model. So already I'm going to set my structure up. Appropriate business model is going to be my heading. They've asked us, we need to perform a quantitative analysis. I've written down what they want us to do. I've included another subtitle. I've included assumptions and I put a little bit a question mark there. When it comes to assumptions, you will be dictated by the case whether you need to discuss them. How do you know that? Well, when it comes to if in the case there's a reason, maybe the information provided to you, there's some biasness, okay? I'm providing you the projected forecast financials, but I want to sell you my company. So there's a good chance that there's biasness built in there. And so you need to identify that under the assumption and then state what that impact could have on your quantitative analysis. When you're performing and you're, doing your analysis of your strategic options when it comes to day one, you should always, and I shared that with you, have include a subtitle assumptions. In day 2 and day 3, a lot of the times you don't necessarily need it. That's why I've got a question mark. I'm going to be guided by case facts. But I know I need to provide a recommendation. Let's put that subtitle there. And I need to recommend two things. They've asked me two things. Which is the best model? And what's the appropriate selling price based on the model I advise them to do? So I have a clear sense of what I need to do, and I have the structure in place to make sure that what they ask me to do, I'm going to do. So the next paragraph states that they need 600,000 for startup costs by the end of the spring. And they are asking us, please advise about advantages and disadvantages of each of the funding sources. Wonderful. Next required. Heading funding sources. I'm going to put in how much money they need and the time frame. And I know that I need to discuss the advantages, the disadvantages, and provide a recommendation. So let's put that structure in. You'll notice by advantages and disadvantages, I have the word why. I want to make sure that I not only state the case fact, but I include the answer to that very important question, so what? Why is it an advantage? Why is it a disadvantage? What's the potential negative impact to the company? So, next paragraph. If we choose the grant, how can we account for the funds received and potential repayments under ASPE? Okay, I'm going to stop there. So right away, I know I have a financial reporting issue. And as soon as you see that, I hope at this point you're thinking I need to use the IGAR format. So I'm going to put that in place. Issue. I'm going to make sure too, all I've got is I know that we need to how to account. The issue is going to be how to account for funds received and potential repayments. Under analysis, I'm going to put ASPE, okay, because that's the accounting framework I know I need to use. I know under my analysis, I need to look at funds received, potential repayments. And under recommendations, I need to make sure that I provide recommendations for funds received, potential repayments. So again, structure is going to increase your chances of, completing a competent response. The next sentence is, what procedures would be performed for the level of assurance specified in the agreement? So I know that we need to do procedures for the grant. And I'm thinking, normally when you do procedures, the appropriate format or discussion framework to use is RAP, risk, account or accounts, assertion or assertions, procedure. Let's put that format there so that I don't forget. Again, that is going to increase the chances of me achieving a competent response. So the next one is they say if we choose the grant, so if they choose the grant, we need to submit an assessment of TinyCo's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Can you please provide us with an analysis? Oh, that's why they were giving that information about their business experience, their relationship. Huh. Guess what? Now I'm going to take that information that I had typed in at the beginning and I'm going to move it under the appropriate category. Heading, SWOT. I'm going to include all over the place here. Remind myself, I need to make sure that I'm not simply going to state the case facts. I need to include the why and the impact. What I've been finding with some candidates that this has worked well is they'll state the case fact, and I'm like, why don't you just put an equal sign? Now, that's no, it shouldn't be there when you finish your response, but the equal sign means I've got my case fact. Now all I need to do is return to that and use a connecting word and discuss the why and the impact. So again, if that trick works for you, give it a try, because not including your why and impact, not answering that so what question, is one of the top 3 reasons why candidates fail CFE. And we don't want that to happen. The next paragraph is Sean Sean says, oh, friends say I can deduct all my moving expenses on my personal income tax return. So moving expenses is my title. He has luxury gave him 5,000 for renovation allowance. So I'm going to put that in. He's got some questions. So again, he already has one. Can I deduct all my moving expenses? The next question is, are my expenses deductible? So can he deduct them all on his personal income tax? What is and is not deductible? And is there anything else I should know regarding the eligibility of the move? I know what Sean has asked me, I need to answer. So again, I'm going to write that down in my outline, and then that increases the chances of ensuring that I answer what he's asked me. So at this point, we've actually read the narrative for the TinyCo. The next step is to scan the appendices and reread the requireds. So in this instance, again, write those requireds on a piece of paper in that rough booklet. So you have it. So we have all of our requireds. The appendices, just flipping through them. Oh, first one, industry information. I'm like, oh, that's going to be full of SWOT, information for my SWOT. Second one is all about the appropriate business model. Third one, it's going to outline all the funding sources and about the grant and the audit procedures. And then the last one's about moving expenses. So again, now I have a good idea. I know what I need to do. I just looked at each of the appendices to see what they're covering. Great. Now let's go into each of those appendix into greater detail, which is your fourth step. So we want to take the relevant information out of that. So the first thing we see again is the industry information. This is all important information for our SWOT. So let's extract that. Lots of opportunities, industries growing, exponential, tiny homes combats rising housing costs. You know what? Some competitors lack the expertise in in tiny house construction, and customers value innovation, high quality construction. Every single one of those are case facts. So if you think that you cannot meet the breadth, in other words, meet whatever the undisclosed number is for the qualitative factors, they're all there for you. You just need to extract them as you're reading. Threats, significant increased number of competitors in North America. Large amount of startup capital is required. And the quality of work from many competitors is poor, which is negatively impacting industry sales and reputation. Again, I've extracted the relevant case facts. I've included the equal sign because when I go back to write my response, I need to change that equal sign into include the why and the impact. So the next appendix starts to provide me with some quantitative information because we know we need to do a quantitative analysis for the appropriate business model. If you are what is known as a kinesthetic learner, and what that means is you learn by doing. So personally, that's also the way that I learn. So I'm looking at this information and I'm seeing numbers. Okay. If you notice that you have a habit when you start seeing numbers, you're starting extracting it and you're putting it into Word. Okay. Now for day 1 and day 2, there is valuable quantitative information in the narrative, okay? Not to this degree as far as, inputs for your calculations or a lot of inputs for your calculations. So I always say those, if it's in the narrative, extract it, take it out, put it in your outline in Word. But we've got the information here that we're going to need for a calculation. Why put it in Word if really you need it in Excel? So off to the other side of the slide, I have this is what you could put in Excel. So always put the purpose and then just extract the information that's given to you. So we've got model 1 without the buyer participating. We've got the different units with the different prices, okay? Do not start to calculate. Do not start to calculate. So underneath that information, it provides us with more qualitative factors as part of our SWOT analysis. So we're going to extract that information too and include it. They happen to all be threats around commodity prices, subject to volatility, that the typical buyer earns $50,000 or less, and they're looking for affordable housing, and that they want the builders to provide World Tiny House Organization certification. Okay? So we now have lots of information for our SWOT. We have that well set up. There is no problem meeting the breadth requirements. And it's not going to take us much to finish that required when we go back and turn it into our response. So let's look at Appendix 2. This is where it starts to give us some cost. So again, I'm starting to read this information and I'm sitting here thinking, for it to make sense, I'd like to include it in Excel. So I'm going to extract it, a new exhibit, and I'm going to record the costs on one side. Okay, so as I'm reading, I'll go, okay, so the first thing is it says in the very first paragraph, it says that customized floor plan for each home is 7,000. Perfect, got it in. And then the trailer base costs the same, 25. Okay. So as I'm reading, I'm including that information in Excel. Even if I don't put it in the right format, again, the benefit is I can easily move it around. If you notice, I've also included notes. And I've included that because why do I need to include notes? Because again, the marker can't ask me, how did I arrive? So construction labor, it's 10,000 for model 1. But for model 2, I only have it, it's 2,000. I need to explain how did I arrive at 2,000, okay? Same thing applies when it comes to material costs. What's interesting about this, and you kind of laugh, is if the user, if the builder, the person who's buying the home participates, costs them less in the construction labor, but it costs them much more in the material because they tend to make mistakes. So again, now I have extracted the important information. There's something here that talks about fixed overhead and that it's estimated to be 100,000 annually up to, so again, fixed costs, but up to 16 homes. If they build more than 16 homes, it's going to be 160,000. Oh, that's an important case fact. So I need to go back to my first exhibit, okay? I've got my prices. I'm going to calculate my costs in the second exhibit, and I'll just put cost per unit up there. Again, not doing anything yet, but I'm going to include the overhead because if you notice, one of the options is that they would create 18 tiny homes. So the overhead's going to be different. And I'll include the note about the overhead. So again, all I've done, same principle, is I've extracted the most important information. Because again, remember, day 3, you could have 3 to 4 cases that needs to be completed over 4 hours. And there's an awful lot of requireds that you need to have done. So this allows you to extract the information so you don't have to go back flipping through your pages, looking at your comments and so on. You have the structure in place to turn it into your response. In this instance, to perform the necessary quantitative analysis. Okay, now we're at Appendix 3. Here's all the funding sources. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extract it. I know that I need to put information under advantages and disadvantages, but right now I'll extract it and then I can organize my thoughts and put them under the appropriate category later. So what options do they have? Personal savings, if they have enough. If their savings are exhausted, then you know what? They'll use their RSPs. Borrow from Cashmart. And there's some terms as far as repayment within 2 years, the interest rate, when the first payment is due, and if they miss the, if they miss a payment, full payment balance is due. So I already have some substance here. I have some good substance to create my advantages and disadvantages. Angel investor. So they'll give them the 600,000, but they want in exchange 60% ownership. I mean, ooh, that's a big disadvantage. Investors have extensive business experience, well known in the technology community. Crowd campaign is one of them, and that 4-year grant. So again, take in the relevant information. And boys, I want to know more about that grant because I need to talk about it here when it comes to the funding And I'm not 100% sure. It looks like I definitely have to do a lot of work from the financial reporting perspective. So let's see if they're going to give me more information. Okay, they do. So let's dissect this. Okay, so the first paragraph talks about that they'll receive 550,000. Like, oh, okay, that's not enough. The full amount is forgivable. There is a condition that conditional upon the company providing an audit report. Okay, it's audit procedures I need to do. Um, so that information, I'm going to put that under the pros and cons, right? The funding sources. Then I get some more information about this grant. So what I'm doing is, as I'm reading it, so it says that it's a total of the 550,000. It's broken down into 350 for operating expenses with a condition that at least 60,000 is to be spent in each of the 4 years of the grant. And then there's 200,000 for capital expenditures. And any amounts not appropriately spent at the end of the 4 years must be repaid. And if the requirements are not met, then what happens is the full amount must be repaid. So I need a lot of this information for 2 different requirements. This is becoming a bit complicated in the aspect of it's not one financial reporting issue, it's 2. I need to tear this information, rip it apart, and put it under 2 separate financial reporting issues. And the reason I say that is because if you don't, you're going to end up missing something, which is going to result in you're going to impede your ability to be able to achieve a competent response. So the first thing I'm going to do is the issue. Okay, remember first I had it how to account for the funds received and for potential repayment. No, talk about how to account for the funds received. Because even under the analysis now, I need to talk about the recognition of the operating expenses and the recognition of the capital expenditures. And I need to provide in the recommendation, again, I'm putting recommendation for operational expenses, recommendation for capital expenses. So I've now kind of taken this required and I've divided it so that it's clearly 2 different discussions. First discussion about how to count for the funds received. Second discussion about how to count for potential repayments. Okay, so anytime you're looking at financial reporting issues, think about, do they need to be analyzed separately? Because if you lump everything together, the chances of a competent response is almost non-existent because human nature, we end up forgetting something. So let's add, okay, so we had some valuable information there about the grant that we also needed to add under our funding sources. So we're going to add that, okay? 550, not 600. It's fully forgivable, okay, as long as they've got provide an audit report. And if the requirements are not met, the full amount must be paid by March 31st, 2027. So again, I've taken out everything I've needed in those appendices, and I either have them in Word or Excel at this point. So here are the different grant requirements. So what I'm going to do is, okay, so these are grant requirements. They aren't linked to a specific account. They won't have an assertion. So all I really need to use for my format is risk and procedure. And the risk is that this grant requirement is not met. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in each of those requirements. I'm not going to be able to get them all done. That's why time allocation is critical. I am going to address as many as I can within the time frame that I have to do and I've assigned for that required. So here's the last appendices, and this is about the moving expenses. And again, now I'm looking at this information. There's lots of notes here. I need to extract this. I know that I'm going to have to recalculate. So what I'm going to do is, as I'm looking at it, again, let's start including that information into Excel. No calculations are done, but if it comes to buy right away, okay, shipping, you know what, there's certain costs that immediately I know, okay, those are going to be covered, and I'll put note 1 that they're fully deductible. Things that I'm not sure of, I'm going to put my notes in and I'm going to come back. But at least I have a start. I have the information there. So let me go back for a second here. This exhibit has more than 10 lines. So what happens is you're going to have, and so I'm showing you on this slide, you have one sheet. It's sheet 1. That is the only sheet that you can actually perform your calculations in. But you also have additional tabs. Those tabs are pre-populated financial information. So any financial information that's 10 lines or more, it's going to be in the tab. So if you notice for day 2, they have a tab for common in English and in French, and then they have a tab for each of your roles. So look there. If there is pre-populated information, then you could copy and paste that information into sheet 1 so you can save valuable time. Because they do that, sometimes maybe you're required ask that you need to identify some data anomalies. That means you're going to have to copy that information and perform and sort it. So make sure, I've seen candidates before, when on day 3, someone says to them, oh yeah, that pre-populated information has been awesome. And the candidates looked and said, where was that? So I'm showing you very clearly another time management, strategy is make sure that you look into those pre-populated tabs. You can't do any calculations, but you can copy that information and paste it into your sheet 1. So we've now extracted everything. So let's take a step back. Step 6 is all about planning. What are you going to do? What's the appropriate quantitative analysis you need to do? What are the questions you need to answer? Well, guess what? We've already done that because as we've extracted the information, we're creating the structure. So, and we're taking the required and we're breaking it down into smaller pieces. Step 7, okay, we're going to do a little bit about this in a while, but step 7 is all about, ordering the requireds, thinking about the fact of, does the analysis and the recommendation of one required impact another? If so, it needs to be done first, okay? In this instance, there isn't anything. Before we order the requireds and do the time allocation, I want to talk about the common time management challenges. What happens is candidates spend too much time in certain assessment opportunities. Sometimes that's because, this is a topic I love. I know it so well. And you just, you know what? It's something you want to do. You're excited about it and you spend a disproportionate amount of time. Sometimes it's because you don't have the technical knowledge. You're not sure what they're asking, or you're not sure how to approach it. The best strategy for that is to move on, because once you kind of let it go to the side for a little while, you're not thinking about it, you're not stressing about it. All of a sudden, as you're doing something else, it'll be like, oh, that's what I do. And so you quickly go back and just put in a note to remind you, this is the type of analysis I do, and then finish the other one. Running out of time. because, again, they spent too much time on certain assessment opportunities, or candidates haven't allocated time for the requireds. Every single time an exam supervisor, I'll walk around to see who has allocated their time. Some candidates allocate their time, but they don't stick to their times. They don't stick to the time budget. All of these are critical behaviors that you must abide by. Because remember, in order to pass, the goal is to complete all of the assessment opportunities within the time frame that you're given. So you notice that, again, best practice is to write your start time and your stop time and watch that clock. So take that time, allocate it, complete it. And we're going to talk about how you base how much time you should on each of your assessment opportunities in a moment. Caution adjusting those times. Okay? I mean, if you're going to, oh, I can do that quicker, or I did that quicker and I'm going to add more time, that's great. That's not what happens. What happens is people start stealing 2 or 3 minutes here for one required, another 2 minutes there. And before you know it, that first case, you've gone over by 10 minutes. Then you do the same thing when it comes to the second case. Now you've lost 20 minutes. Now you're down to your third case. Maybe that case has the most complicated assessment opportunities of any of them. If you're missing 20 minutes, there's a good chance that that's going to work out to be at least two required, potentially three. So be very cognizant of your time. So let's look at the time allocation. But before I do that, I want to show you. So let me give you an idea. This is what that outline. So this is what it looked like in Word. You'll notice that I've kind of crossed out because all of this information here at the top, I'm going to delete. But here's the structure. Okay, so we went through an awful lot of slides, but this is the structure. Look, my SWOT's great. Just have to go back and do the why. I've got it set up well. So that's what that looks like in Word. Let's look at what our quantitative analysis. Look at all the information we already have in there. So again, I'm going to base my time allocation on the information I already have at hand. So when I'm looking at my quantitative analysis, it's not going to take me a lot when it comes to the business model. Okay? I've got some of this already done. My SWOT, not going to take me a lot of time. So as a result, for the best model, 5 minutes. Funding, it's going to take me a little bit more because I've got to get my structure in place. Grant, that's going to take me a while. The procedures, I'm going to do as much as I can within the time I have. SWOT, maybe 5 minutes, probably going to be less. Tax, I'm allocating 7 minutes. And then I'm saving some time to review so that I can go back and, you know what, if I thought, oh, I just need 1 or 2 more sentences for that particular required, then I have the time to go back. So you notice I've set start and stop time. Okay, so that is how you can create an efficient and effective outline in Word and Excel, and it works very well for day 3. Do not take and start extracting all of the quantitative information in Excel for day 1 or for day 2 in particular. That doesn't work well, okay? For day 1 and day 2, just put the page numbers of those appropriate exhibits. But this works very well when it comes to day 3. It works very well with one very important caveat. You must practice this. You have to practice it a lot to be able to perfect it. So what are the tips for success? Time management is a big challenge for most candidates. And the best way to manage your time is to practice writing the cases in the recommended time. Okay? Practice, practice, manage your time. Stick to those recommended time allocation. You've got to stick to it. So let's talk about the triggers. Okay, because you don't want to miss an assessment opportunity. So be on the lookout for triggers that indicate this is what I need to do. Some of the triggers can be direct requests or they can be indirect requests. They can be in your narrative, but they can also be in the appendices. Be on the lookout. There could be an additional required in your appendices. Look for words such as and phrases of ask, directs, oh, I'm wondering, can you help us? What are your views? So example of direct required. Those are very straightforward. They ask you to perform something. If you notice, every single one of the required for the tiny code were direct. They specifically asked us to do something. What about the indirect required? Those are, I'm going to go through some of the examples. So it could be that, you know what, there's something confusing to the user or something that the user doesn't know. So if you hear kind of the words of, well, I'm not sure if I handled this correctly, or maybe most likely it's right. That is an indication that you need to talk about what they're uncertain. Okay, and perform whatever the appropriate analysis is. That the user says, you know what, something the user says that they do not have, and you think, oh, but that's important. Again, that's the trigger. Something the user thinks is correct. Hey, you know what? I recorded the revenue for that signing bonus as soon as we got the money in. And you're sitting here going, but that contract's over 3 years. That's not correct. There's a hidden issue the user doesn't know about and should. Okay, so again, if there's, and they call it a structural trigger. So if they're presenting you with information, it's like, but they haven't asked us about this. That is a structural trigger. Something that directly addresses the user's objectives or concern. What are the importance? Why is it so important to address the user's request? Well, a user's request, whether it's direct or indirect, is a required. It's what you need to do. A required is an assessment opportunity. And we know assessment opportunity is directly linked to the CFE passing profile. So a request, whether it's direct or indirect, is critical. Because again, let's go back to the information I shared during understanding the CFE. When it comes to level 2 and level 3, you want to make sure that you do the best that you can and prepare as many competent responses as you can when it comes to management accounting, financial reporting, and your role. You also know that when it comes to level 1, that undisclosed scoring, the same thing, it's undisclosed for level 2 and 3, the number of competent responses that you need. You do know that competent is worth more than reaching competent. When it comes to level 4, it's about completing an undisclosed number of assessment opportunities and achieving reaching competent or higher. So those assessment opportunities matter. I love this quote. It's by a famous hockey player, Canadian hockey player, Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you don't complete assessment opportunity or it's a superficial attempt, you know that not addressing, or a nominal competency assessment is going to, it's not going to count towards any of those levels, which again has a negative impact on your ability to pass CFE. So let's talk about the quantitative tools. And these tools, all of this information is available to you. I've taken what CPA Canada has given us. It's fantastic. All of this information came out of the management accounting ebook. So let's talk about cost volume profit analysis. So what types of questions does it answer? It assists in pricing products, analyzing the impact, that volume or change in cost would have on short-term profits, and also analyzing the product mix. What types of tools should you be familiar with? Well, break even, whether it's what's the minimum units needed to break even, or revenue to cover those fixed costs and variable costs. Target profit. So what's the sales units or dollars needed to attain a particular level of profit? Point of indifference. Now that's where the decision, you know what? The benefit is equal between one or two options or more. And I want to highlight this. So point of indifference is identified as a testable item in the competency map. Based on my knowledge, there's only one instance that I know of where candidates are asked to calculate point of indifference, and that is in Core 2, the module workshop. And I can say over the last 7 years, I've only known 2 or 3 candidates who actually remembered how to calculate it. Guess what they did? Recently, the point of indifference was on one of the CFE exams. And the comment from the Board of Examiners was that the performance was, the overall, the performance was weak. So again, it's important to go back and look at the CFE, look at the CPA competency map. That is your syllabus. So don't just base your technical study on what you're being covered or what's been tested in the past, because the competency map, that's your syllabus. Those identify the areas that are testable. Again, start with A, then B, and then C. Contribution margin, very important analysis. So that determines the effective use of constrained resources. So what's the appropriate product mix to maximize profit? So when they're talking about, appropriate product mix, I'm thinking contribution margin. You know what the next thing I'm thinking is, Debbie, be on the lookout for a constraint, because I know then I need to calculate contribution margin per constraint. Variance analysis. So that allows you to break down those costs, that relate to price and quantity. That helps the user kind of troubleshoot for unexpected results. And it's all about that promoting learning and continuous improvement. There's various calculations, okay, that you need to be comfortable with. So flexible budget variance, sales volume variance. There's not a lot of times that I've seen in the professional education program that they've had the sales volume variance, but it's been on CFE, and the candidates, because they haven't looked at it, haven't done well. Sales price or rate variance, efficiency variance. Now, when you're asked to perform a variance analysis, be on the lookout, because they're not going to just say, oh, here's the standard cost, here's the, standard price, here's the standard volume. They're going quantity. They're going to end up, there's going to be some trickiness. So make sure that you're reading those case facts carefully. You don't only perform the calculations. The next part is an entry-level CPA. We're expected, and part of the CPA way is to provide advice. So why is that variance favorable or unfavorable? So for example, say one of the inputs is flour and it's unfavorable variance. And you're going, well, that's because the actual price is higher than the plan price. Well, saying that is not adding any value. That's simple math. That's obvious. I can tell that. It anyone can figure that out. But again, the case facts should provide you with some valuable insight. Well, flour is a commodity. And it will talk about potentially that the commodity prices are volatile. That's why. That is the case fact. That's why that variance is unfavorable. What advice would you provide to that user? A way of avoiding that variance is to look at or investigate, you know, um, getting a contract with the supplier so that they have a steady price. That is the expectation. So calculate, explain why, based on case facts, provide some advice. Capital budgeting. That's all about determining profitability of a capital investment or, like a large capital expenditure. What kind of tools? Net present value, okay, which takes into consideration that time value of money. So using an appropriate discount rate, depending on the level of risk. The next point I want to really emphasize, because this is an area that the Board of Examiners find that we candidates fall very short. You need to consider only the relevant, the incremental revenues, incremental inflows and outflows of implementing that option. Okay? So let me give you a specific example. So say that you're going to buy equipment. It's $1 million and you're going to be able to produce product B. The company is already producing product A. In your net present value calculation, you're only going to the inflows and the outflows are going to only be for product B. Don't include product A, okay? Because this is about determining whether this is a viable option, and that is only for product B. You also need to include relevant opportunity cost. So let's keep going with that example. If the company produces product B, what happens is because of capacity constraints, say, they cannot produce, they're going to have to produce 500 less of product A. They're going to lose revenue. So you're going to look at what's the lost opportunity cost. The lost opportunity cost is the lost contribution of those 500 units for product A. That must be in your net present value calculation. So a best practice is make sure that you understand, and kind of create yourself a shell. I don't call it a template, I call it a shell, that what normally should be in year 0. Where and how should you be handling if there is working capital? How do you handle salvage value? Okay, know where this information falls so that again, when you're extracting that relevant case facts, you know where it should be included in your net present value. Also, if cash, if your combined inflow and outflow is the same from year, say, for example, year 4 all the way through to year 25, then calculate the present value of an annuity and bring it back to time 0. That's going to save you an awful lot of time. Look at another quantitative tool is the internal rate of return. So that calculates the discount rate for the project if, if it's a 0 net present value. Payback period. So how much time is it going to be to get back the investment or to break even? Valuations. So whether it's of an asset or a business. So adjusted net asset valuation. So that's, if the company doesn't have an active operations or they don't make any excess earnings, limited at all. And I mean, it's used a lot to determine the floor value. Okay, that's the minimum price. Income based. So that's when the company's a going concern. Market based. That's when there's public traded information. So you've got some reasonable comparabilities. Financial statement analysis. Okay, that allows you to determine the financial health of company. It allows you to, if they give you industry averages, you're going to calculate, you know, how does the company perform against the industry? If they give you more than 1 year, it's talking about the trends. Is it improving? Is it getting worse? Is it stable? The different types of analysis you could perform are horizontal, okay, so comparing financial information over time. Vertical, so that's comparing, or common size trend, that's comparing against one line. Normally it's revenue. And ratio analysis, okay? Costing methods. Make sure that you're familiar with those methods, whether it's job costing, process costing, activity-based costing, okay? Make sure that you're comfortable with that. It's a very testable item. And knowing that you need to identify those different cost pool, determine the appropriate allocation base, determine, calculate the allocation rate, joint product costing. When it comes to pricing, strategies. Make sure that you understand what those strategies are, when they are appropriate to use, cost-based pricing, variable product cost-based pricing, full absorption. So that your selling price includes all of your costs, including fixed, because ultimately that's the pricing you want to look at. Life cycle. Demand-based pricing. Okay, understand what those are, when they would be appropriate. Transfer pricing. Okay, you have 3 different options, whether it's cost-based, market-based, or negotiation. Be comfortable in knowing that what are the benefits, what are the disadvantages of each of those options. Make sure that when you're talking about, negotiating transfer price, what's the minimum? What's the maximum? And the biggest thing is when it comes to transfer pricing is, are they operating at full capacity? Okay. And if there's an external market, the decisions made should be in the best interest of the company as a whole, not of the division, the company as a whole. So if there's an external market and you know what, the external price is $10, they are operating at full capacity, then the transfer price is $10. That's the most appropriate. But if they have excess capacity, the most appropriate price is the variable price, what it costs them to produce that particular product as they transfer it, to the other division. So let's talk a bit about writing strategies. So the common challenges is the response is not clear and concise and not addressing that so what. The objective is to make sure that your response is clear, concise, organized, so that structure's really helped. Make sure that each word is closely chosen, that your response is assertive and confident. Okay. One of the things I find is sometimes candidates are, well, I recommend this if this is what you want to do. I recommend this if this is what you want to do. They provided you 99.9% of the time, they provided you with enough information. In a lot of instances, you performed a quantitative and qualitative analysis. Provide them with the recommendation based on the analysis you performed. If you think, I'm not comfortable, the revenue, that seems a little bit too aggressive, I'm not sure that that's going to happen, then provide the recommendation and say before implementing, please validate that that revenue assumption is reasonable. Or maybe, it looks good when it comes from evaluation, you recommend that they purchase the company. But the caveat is that, you want to make sure that they have audited financials. Make sure that your conclusions are well reasoned and supported. It's important to write concisely means less is more. So this is not about information dumping. Here's everything I know. Hopefully I'll give you something you want. That is not an appropriate strategy. When you provide technical information, explain it in plain English. More likely than not, your audience is not an accountant. Check that when it comes to the user. So hence the reason why it makes much more sense to paraphrase the criteria when it comes to financial reporting. Avoid long sentences and paragraphs, okay? How do you reduce your wordiness? You know if you have a habit of writing information that is unnecessary. So when you're debriefing, you're thinking, boy, I wrote a whole paragraph and the only thing that really mattered was one sentence. Cross out that information, rewrite it. Teach yourself to be clear and concise, okay? Can you say something in, instead of instead of a paragraph, can you say it in one or two sentences? Here's an example. This comes from the Enabling Competency book. So here's a response, crossed out all the wording. Look, what from 110 words to 37. This also saves you valuable time. So another thing is, I talked about it. I just want to bring it back to the forefront again. The structure. Some of these discussion frameworks helps with clear and concise, also helps with saving time. So the IGAR. Make sure that you're looking at the competency map when it comes to your financial reporting issues, because if you notice, I've got them here and I see a lot of A's, which mean I know I need to know them and I need to know them well. If you haven't, please make sure that you use the competency map Excel spreadsheet and sort it. That WIR, okay? That's great when you're critiquing, when it comes to identifying internal control issues, weaknesses, governance weaknesses. Maybe you're asked to look at a proposed contract, or you're asked to look at auditors' junior work. It's great. It makes, what it does is W stands for weakness, risk, or issue. I stands for implication. R stands for recommendation. Guess what? To meet the depth requirement, you have to talk about the implication. It's a very good format to use. If you are asked to prepare, a memo, an audit planning process memo, guess what? RAMP. Think of it. So these are the areas you need to cover: risk, approach, materiality, procedures. When you're writing your procedures, format to use: risk, wrap, okay, risk, accounts and assertions, procedure. And when you're writing your procedure, think of VVOP. So verb, what do you have to do? What's the object? Verb, what's the object and purpose? When you are in order to meet your depth requirement, when it comes to mission, vision, you're talking about alignment and key success factors, you have to be specific. What wording, how is implementing that option aligned with the mission, vision, or value, key success factor? When it comes to key success factors, you also have to talk about the why and the impact. Same thing, SWOT, PESTLE, pros, cons. When you're talking about in day one and performing that quantitative analysis as part of your situational analysis framework, you not only calculate, what's the ratio, what's driving it? Okay, why is it good? Why is it bad? What's driving that number? What does that mean from a future perspective? Versus based on the case facts provided. So if they have limited cash, limited availability when it comes to financing, what does that do? That limits the strategic options, the types of options that they can implement and how many. That's the implication. So what? Hey, state the case fact. Use a linking word. That's that equal sign. Turn it into a linking word, whether it's therefore. My favorite is which could. Okay, so a threat is a significant increase in the number of competitors. That's the what. So what? Which could result in lower sales than projected. That is the why and the impact. So I've shared with you on the day one webinar how to address the how when it comes to the vision and key success factors. So I've shared it here with you again. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this particular slide, but again, make sure that you go back. If you haven't watched the day one webinar, make sure that you watch that. There's some valuable information there. The last thing I want to share with you is that there is a section, okay, so under the knowledge list and examples around data analytics and information systems. So we as CPAs have to be able to provide, to conduct certain types of analysis and be able to provide some advice. So there's some great information in the management accounting ebook. I've included the chapters there. The types of examples that have happened in the past is particularly, examples where people have been able to ask to identify patterns, to provide audit procedures around data analytics, to provide some advice and evaluate the IT system that they have in place. The last example I've already shared with you, to perform data analysis to identify any of the anomalies. Here are all the resources that I've used to create this webinar for you. So there's lots of information in the management accounting ebook. All of those chapters, that is what I did for the quantitative tools. For the writing and the discussion framework, those are the chapters that I used. That competency map and the competency tool, very, very important. Flashcards. Take some time, use those. And for those of you who don't have access to the TinyCo, here's where you can find it. So as a May approaches, it's very important for you to focus on what you can control. I know at this stage, a lot of candidates are very nervous, okay? Because they're still struggling with perfecting their critical reading, outlining, and planning. It's the simple solution is practice, practice, practice. It's simple saying it does require time commitment on your part. Banish those negative thoughts. The best thing to do is don't feel overwhelmed. Take a good breath. Revisit your action plan. Think about how much time do I have between now and then? Prioritize, okay? Between now and when you're going to write, prioritize the course material. There's only so much you can do. You're human. There's only so many hours in the day. And you do not want to go into that exam exhausted. You need to take care of yourself because it's important that you are at peak performance when you're writing CFE. Allocate time to study. Allocate time to practice. You will get better. Yes, you will. So the CFE Support webinar series, this is our roadmap for you on how to successfully pass CFE. All of the information is available. This recording will be available shortly, so over the next 2 days. Please, we value your feedback, so please take the time to complete the survey. And now I'd like to open up the floor for any questions you have.
All right, no, thanks, Debbie, for the presentation here. And we'll spend about 10 or 15 minutes or so in regards to the Q&A. So we'll try to answer as many questions as we can during tonight's presentation here. If we are not able to answer your question, we sincerely apologize for that. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature within Teams, and that way we'll try to either have one of my colleagues here be able to answer them online, or we'll also be able to address them to Debbie directly. As Debbie had mentioned there before, we ask everyone to kindly fill out the survey to provide your feedback. This way we can continue to improve upon these webinars, so that way in future series we'll make sure it's a beneficial for all future candidates. So just to let you guys know there. So now I'm just going to go quickly into the Q&A portion of tonight's webinar here. So the first question here, and I'm going to start off with this here, Debbie. I think a lot of candidates, and you mentioned this here, may have the sense they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed at this particular stage in terms of where they're at in terms of capstone to CFE studying and everything like that. So the question that came about here was that in your model, which you showed, and you took the time to go through it step by step, there's some concerns in terms of students outlining here. Oh, is it reasonable to be able to go through it step by step when you're just trying to read and understand what's going on in the case there? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that in terms of the process that's involved in terms of addressing the case.
Sure. So it's a very valid question. Did I complete that in 25 minutes? Yes, I did. Have I spent an extensive amount of time creating outlines? Yes, I have. So if this is your first time creating an outline where you're reading the information and typing it is going to take some practice. It isn't something that you automatically get good at. But if you do practice, for some candidates, I have the privilege of working with some people who haven't been successful in the past. And the first thing I say is start just creating your outlines, start just reading the case. Perfect that piece, create that outline, practice that. And then ask yourself, because if you're getting tied up in all the technical piece, and then you're kind of putting it aside and learning the technical piece, then you're not giving yourself valid time to be able to create the outline. But the fundamental concept is if you're doing it and just learning, it is going to take time. And the only way that you can get good at it is you have to do it over and over and over again. And you will get and you can get what I showed you done in 25 minutes. You can do it, but you must practice it.
All right. No, thanks there, Debbie. And I'd just like to also reiterate here. So at this particular stage, in terms of your studying here, I would say for majority of candidates, you're just at the early stages in terms of developing your style and everything like that. It's not about how well you're doing right now. It's about how well you're doing a month from now. So in this case here, what we find is that it may take a little bit of time, but eventually, as you practice more and more, you'll start to get better and better and then start to peak, as they say there. And what you want to do is peak at the moment you're writing the sleepy in regards to it, because at that point, it'll be the aha moment. So don't
Mm,
feel concerned about, okay, I'm not getting this right now and everything like that. That is okay. That is perfectly normal
mm,
in regards to it's just the way the exam is structured. And the big thing to remember here, and I know Debbie will reiterate this, is not just strictly about technical competencies, it's about enabling competencies too. So just remember that. in
Yeah,
regards to
I
it.
I
Thank you.
love what you said, Mandeep. Exactly. It's okay. You're still in the development stage of perfecting, and you aren't going to be able to, be perfect. That's all right. I know that's hard for some of you. You will get better. I love what you've said. Absolutely. You're going to
Um,
peak.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
trust the process in regards to
Mm-hmm.
there. This question came up, and I think it's a great question because, yeah, I think some candidates may be thinking about this as well. So for this is just particularly in relate to day three. So with day three, there are multiple cases. So as opposed to day one and day two, where you're just going through one case at a time, and because there's one case for day one and one case for day two. But day three, you can have multiple cases. So a question that came in is that is it best to read all three day three cases before starting to outline and complete them, and then complete the cases in order that you're most comfortable in? Or should we just go through each case one case at a time there?
Yes, absolutely go through it one case at a time. Okay. So again, if the time is 100 minutes, tackle the first case, focus on that case. Don't be concerned about the next case. Focus on what you need to do in that 100 minutes. Okay. Then it's almost like you're closing that book. You're closing that case. So one of the techniques we talk about in stress management is to make sure that you take deep breaths. Well, that's a great time. You close the book on that case, that's done. Open the book for the next case. You're, it's only one book, but it's the same kind of concept, right? And then you tackle it. Tackle one thing at a time. Because if you looked at all of those, you would feel overwhelmed and your stress would get the best of you. The process is one case at a time.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so there's what you'll see is that you will get access to all of the cases right away. So this is something where CPA basically lets you do what you want to do there, but as Debbie mentioned, it's more advisable to do it one case at a time. And in regards to their the next question has come up. Certain candidates, in terms of, may have limitations in regard to the amount of time they have available to study. So they may have a very limited time off from now till the day of the CFE. So, Debbie, what's the best advice you can give at this point with about 5 weeks to go for candidates who are in this type of position?
Sure. So first of all, I want to let you know that, you know, have there been people who have passed who have had very little time off before? Absolutely. It's what you do with the time that you have that's important. So again, so when you think about you have 5 weeks left. So what are your priorities within that 5 weeks? What time do you have? When is it best for you to actually practice, to write cases for your technical study? Carve out those times and then prioritize what you need to do. And the prioritizing has to be guided by the CPA competency map. And when you're looking at it, be honest with yourself. Lots of times we kind of, again, spend time on things that we know well already. If you know well and you've been able to successfully, you know what, you're achieving competent on those types of assessment opportunities, let that go. Focus on the areas that you need to. So prioritize is critical. What time do you have and use the most of that time? Because guess what? I can do a lot in 2 hours if that's all I have. And sometimes I have 8 hours and I do the same amount of work that I could have done in 2 hours. It's how you manage your time is important.
Oh, that's great there, Debbie. And what you're saying sounds like what actually candidates would do on a case, where you're
Yes.
prioritizing your issues, figuring out what needs to be done, and how much time you can allocate to all of it. So it's one where there's a method to the madness, as we would like to say, in
I love it,
regards
Nadine.
to that part there. A couple questions have come in. I think this is just more for efficiency, which is I think that's a great question there. So Debbie, what are your thoughts on the use of acronyms? So like for example, like financial statements, sometimes you can use like FS or AR for accounts receivable and everything like that. Is it considered to be acceptable in the responses? As sometimes just even the use of acronyms could save candidates a little bit of time there.
You know what? There's every industry uses acronyms. If it's Again, think about the user that you're writing to. Is it reasonable that they would understand that acronym? Or if you're going to use an acronym and you know what, if you write it out the first time, then put bracket what that acronym is, then again, a non-accountant would understand what you're talking about. But I mean, accounts receivable or financial statements, some of those things very much anyone would understand what you're talking about, and that would be acceptable. I've seen some unusual things where I'm thinking, I'm not sure what that acronym means. I know it's something that they've used a shortcut when they've created their outline, but if an acronym is going to impede your ability to get your message across, then the answer would be no. Okay, because you don't, the user, the marker in this case, wants to give you credit for everything that you've done. So make sure that whatever you've put on the page, it's easily understood. And some of those examples maybe that you gave there can be easily understood, but I've seen ones where they haven't been.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would say a lot of the times if don't try to make up your own acronyms. If the markers don't understand what it is, then it's very hard for them to make assumptions in regards to that. So yeah, as Debbie mentioned there. So we have time just for a couple of last questions there. There's one question I'm going to save right to the end in regards to everything there. But with this question here, the candidate was asking in terms of balancing review of technical view versus writing cases. So Debbie, at this point, would you recommend that for candidates is more advisable to start writing cases at this particular stage and then review off the technical from those cases, or should candidates still be reviewing the technical knowledge and then write cases when they're comfortable doing so?
Okay. So unfortunately, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
It really depends because the when it comes to the reasons why candidates don't pass CFE, it is tied a lot of the time to those enabling competencies. So your ability to be able to prioritize, your ability to be able to provide a clear and concise response, your ability to perform the correct analysis based on what the user's needs are, based on what they're asking you to do. That's all tied into writing the case. So you have to spend time actually writing the case. But if you find that you have a big technical gap, or you're having some, you're having a few areas that are technically challenged, then spending all your time writing a case and consistently getting nominal competency is not going to be good for your confidence, and you're not building, you don't have a good foundation. So the question becomes, at times, you have to sit back and say, does today or does, this morning need to be about the technical piece? I need to take some of this information and go through it so that I'm better equipped to be able to put my best foot forward. And what I'm concentrating and what I'm developing is my enabling competencies, my writing the response opposed to the technical. So again, it's very situational and you'll know, okay, here's some areas I'm really struggling in from a technical piece. I'm like, take a break for a moment. Technical's got to take a priority. Oh, I'm not getting the assessment opportunities done because I'm not able to, I'm not creating an efficient and effective outline. That means I need to do more practice in my writing piece, in the enabling. So it's very situational, but you do need to figure out the balance for yourself. Know that for a lot of you, you have the technical skill. It might mean that, and I use this analogy a lot, is that you have it, but it's at the back of your head in the file folder back there. And that requires that you need to bring it forward. So when I think of the financial reporting issues, hmm, I might not have written a lot of cases around financial reporting issues if my role is PM for the last year and a half. Take those flashcards, go through them. What do I know? What don't I know? What do I need to look at? So that you got that solid base that you had, bring it forward, and then you're going to spend so much more time on the writing piece. Hopefully
All
that
right.
helps.
No, thanks there, Debbie. And then, yeah, we only have time for one more question here, but we do apologize if we weren't able to answer your question in regards to everything there. But I saved this one. It's the most important one, I think, for the end here. So we had a couple of candidates talking about in terms of preparing for the CFE is like an experience where it's the most stress they've ever felt in their life. And for me, like I've gone through this process as well. I can definitely say that, yeah, it is a very stressful thing to go through here. So, the questions coming up here, and we do have a webinar which talks about stress management, but that was important to include this question here. Debbie,
Mhm.
what tips do you have for candidates at this particular point to help manage stress to get the best out of their study time here?
Absolutely. So it's critical that, first of all, what you tell yourself is important. So you have come a long way to get here. You do have a solid background. There, you do have the technical base. You have to tell yourself that you can do this. That's part of it. What we tell ourselves is what we believe. Make sure that you're not to a point that you're paralyzing yourself, okay? And you just think that everything is it's insurmountable. I can't do this. I can't get it all completed. Break it down into smaller pieces. And that's one of the bits of advice I talk about when it comes to stress management. Do some things that are going to release some of your stress, okay? Whether it's walking, listening to a podcast, make sure that you're giving some time to also take care of your emotional and your physical health, that's an important component. And again, know that you do have the base, so you have to be able to take those deep breaths, take a moment, regroup, give your brain time to refresh, and then tackle it again.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's one where, yeah, take it one day at a time, in regards to everything there. It is a marathon, it is not a sprint. So what
Mhm.
everyone's feeling is perfectly natural.
It
If you
is.
weren't stressed, I would actually be a little bit, concerned about that, in regards to that. So the stress part is natural in regards to it. So yeah, we encourage, candidates and everyone to view over Debbie's webinar, which talks about stress management. But just to
Mhm.
let you guys know, next week on Tuesday, April 22nd, we'll be hosting a separate webinar, which is actually a live panel discussion with recent successful CFE writers. So what we'll be doing in that, everybody across Canada here is able to attend that. Is that we're able to essentially, we'll talk to a couple of guys who just recently passed the
Mm.
CFE to get a kind of a perspective from candidates who just wrote the exam. So reach out to your region if in terms of if you're looking for the registration for that webinar, but it should be available in the either Introduction to Capstone 2 and CFE module and also in the Capstone 2 module. There should be a newsfeed post about it. But Debbie, on behalf of the CPA Western School of Business, CPA Ontario, CPA Atlantic, and would like to thank you in regards for all the 6 webinars here. We really appreciate you spending the time and effort to be able to put these webinars together. So I want to say thank you on behalf of everybody here. And lastly, for the candidates, I know it's 5 weeks left. You will get there out on the other side. We believe in you guys. You guys will get there. I know it's one where, yep, it seems like it's gonna be a long road in regards to it, but before you know it, once you've written the exam, it will be over. So keep on pursuing. We know you can get there. And everybody, have a great rest of the evening and
Yes.
best of luck in your CFE study.
You can do it.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, guys.